In this lesson, we're going to make some changes that will let us create different types of actions that we can assign to the different game items. So this will let us do items that heal or that steal hit points from a monster we're attacking, or anything else that we want to do. We'll start by opening the solution, and in the Actions folder in the Engine project, we're going to create a new file. But it's not going to be a new class, it's going to be an interface file. To create the interface file, you'll right-click on the Actions folder, select Add, New Item, then under Visual C# Items, click on Code, and select this type that says Interface. And for the name, call it capital I and Action with a capital A. So it's IACTION.CS. You don't need to create interfaces that start with capital I and then capitalize the first word, but that's a common practice, so we're going to stick with that. I already created my interface file, so I'll cancel this and just show you the file. In this case, an interface has nothing to do with a user interface. This is more like a contract. For all of our action classes, there's two things that we care about in any action class we create. First is that it's going to have this onActionPerformed event that returns an event handler string. And second, that it has an execute function that takes a living entity actor and living entity target parameter and has a void return type. So all of our actions, we need to have these two things in it. It can have other things, we don't care if there's extra things, but we have to have this because our program is going to call the execute function on any action, and it's going to get back any reports from the action object through the onActionPerformed event. So those two things have to be present for every action we create. And this iAction interface is how we're going to ensure that all of our actions implement the required features. Besides being a contract, an interface is also a data type. Right now in the code we have, our game item action property, its data type is attack with weapon. So the only thing we can put into that action property is an attack with weapon object. But we want to eventually do different things with different game items, put different types of actions in there. So we're going to change it so the property, the data type is iAction. It will take any action in. Anything that implements everything listed in the interface, which is the onActionPerformed event and the execute function. So now we need to go into the attack with weapon class and say that this class implements the interface. The attack with weapon class already has the event onActionPerformed and the public void execute function that's identified in the interface. But until we actually go to line 6, where we say public class attack with weapon, and add space colon space iAction, kind of like you would with the base class. Until we add this iAction, we can't say that attack with weapon implements the interface. It has all the functions and events that are listed in the interface, but we don't explicitly say that attack with weapon is an iAction object until we add in this colon iAction. Once we do that with any class, for any of our actions, we need to make sure the class implements the properties, events, and functions listed in the interface, which this already does. And now we can treat all of our attack with weapon objects as iAction objects. You can think of this kind of like a base class. Right now the player, the monster, and trader all have a base class of living entity, so we can treat a player object as a player object or as a living entity object. It's the same with the interface. We can treat an attack with weapon object as an attack with weapon object or as an iAction object. But if we treat it as an iAction object, the only thing available are the things listed in the interface file. So our attack with weapon class could have extra properties, extra functions, extra events, but if we treat it as an iAction object, then we only have access to the iAction members. If we treat it as an attack with weapon object, then we have access to everything that attack with weapon has. The final change is going to be to go into the game item class and change the data type on line 18 for our action property to iAction, because now we want to hold any type of iAction object in here. And then in line 21 on the game item constructor, change the data type from attack with weapon to iAction. So now when we construct a game item object, we can pass in any iAction object, which will then get stored into the action property, which will hold any type of iAction object. So if we go down and look at the perform action function on line 31, it's calling the action.execute. But if we hover over action, it says the data type is iAction, and execute is visible because our interface shows execute as an available function in the interface. So now that game item can hold any type of action in the action property, we can create our new actions. Our heal action, we could create an action where you do damage to a monster and you take some hit points from them and you heal with some of those hit points. We could create an action, maybe a spell, where you randomly steal an object out of their inventory, because our iAction just says we're passing in a living entity for the actor and for the target. So anything available in the living entity, like the inventory, would be available inside our execute function. The final step would be to run your unit test and run the game and make sure it still works. I've already done that, so I won't show it here. There'll be a link below the video to the support page where I'll have all the source code and a place for you to put any questions or comments you have there. But I'd say this is an important thing to understand. There's a practice in programming called writing to interfaces. So instead of writing your code to deal with explicit objects like the attack with weapon object, you write your code to deal with objects that implement an interface, in this case the iAction interface. So your code doesn't care what type of object gets into a certain function as long as you can do certain actions with it. In this case, the execute is going to be our big action. So let me know if you have any questions about this, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks.